Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 93, an enthronement psalm. I have to say, that's sort of a long title to give to such a short little psalm. It reminds me of how we had this little cockatiel many years ago, and his name was Oliver Cromwell. And friend remarked, yes, he's such a little bird, he needs a big name. Maybe that's the case here. Very short psalm, but it's going to talk about God on its throne. Let's dig in. We begin, the Lord reigns. Notice there's no superscription, so we just jump right to the psalm. The Lord reigns, he is clothed with majesty. And notice the clothed part because that's repeated. The Lord has clothed, but not just clothed, and girded himself with strength. So that those are clothing words. Indeed, the world is firmly established, it will not be moved. And then verse 2, your throne is established from of old. So notice God is reigning. And then there's a reference in verse 2 to his throne, which is why I called it an enthronement psalm. But notice the world is firmly established, and then your throne is established from of old, and finally you're from everlasting. Now, the Legacy Standard Bible, and that's a new translation, an updated the New American Standard. It translates it basically the same way, except notice, just it goes, the world, indeed, the world is established, it pulls out the word firmly. It will not be shaken. Shaken versus moved, that's really the same thing. And then again, your throne is established from of old. And the reason I even mentioned it, the reason I looked it up is because I thought, gee, is there a difference between firmly established versus being established? And the answer is no. It was identical words. They're both in the imperfect tense. I mean, one's an adjective, one's a participle, but same basic word. So notice how they took off the firmly. They're not being mean to the world. They're just saying it's the same word, translate it the same way. And so my hat's off to the Legacy Standard Bible. I'm going to mention this again in just a bit. But what we see here in the first two verses, notice established. What we see here as God is, he's reigning, his throne, and he's from everlasting, is that the Lord's reign is eternal. You are from everlasting. God is reigning, and he's been reigning as far back as you go. There was never a beginning of his reign, and there's never an end to his reign. From eternity to eternity, God reigns. That's the point of verses 1 and 2. Now we come to verses 3 through 5, and that's as far as it's going to go. Remember, this little psalm is only 5 verses long. But notice as we jump in, the floods have lifted up, O Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their pounding waves. Now, the term here, translated floods, the naharot, the oath is the feminine, that's the feminine ending, although actually the word's masculine, but it's got a feminine ending, and that's the plural. That's what, the difference between flood versus flood is the plural of nahar, which is just the word. Notice we've translated here floods, but it's actually usually translated river. And if you go to, for example, Genesis chapter 2, verse 6, a nahar flowed out of the Garden of Eden, a river flowed out. Or 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 12, that talks about the rivers of Damascus. Remember, that's when this fellow from Damascus had been told to go wash himself in the Jordan. He says, they've got rivers up there, I got to wash myself up there. Or in Psalm 137:1, by the rivers of Babylon. Each of those is that our same term here, nahar. And so the Legacy Standard Bible rendered this, in each case, the rivers have lifted up. The rivers have lifted up their voice. The rivers lift up their pounding waves. And that's actually more literal. And you say, well, why did the King James and a few other translations render it floods? I think they did it because of what the rivers are doing. Notice the rivers have lifted up. Rivers, when a river lifts up, we just, as I'm recording this, we just had about a week or two ago some floods in Texas where there were rivers there, but they overflowed their banks and actually a bunch of people died. A bunch of people got killed. It was a tragedy. And so when rivers overflow their banks, they turn into floods. So maybe floods was okay. The rivers have lifted up. The rivers have lifted up their voice. The rivers lift up their pounding waves. when a river lifts up and overflows, and there's pounding waves. And notice verse 4, more than the sounds of many waters, more than the mighty breakers of the sea. This is a river that's not just a gently flowing river anymore. Uh, this is times of trouble. Now, let me tell you a little something about life in the desert. And you say, well, the Israelites weren't necessarily in a desert. Yes, they were people that came out of the desert. And parts of Israel, especially when you go to the mountains and then you continue going east, you find yourself in the wilderness areas, what we call the Judean wilderness. And if you go south, there's more wilderness there. And what happens there, you've got these rivers. Sometimes they're little streams, little tiny rivers, and they've cut a trench though. The Arabic word for them is a wadi. And what happens, it will rain on the mountains, and there in the desert where it hardly ever rains, the water will come rushing down. And if you're caught in the riverbed, you can get washed away. It can be a dangerous thing. And so the picture here, when it's talking about the rivers or the floods, however you want to render it, but they're lifting up their voice, they're lifting up their pounding waves, the sounds of many waters, the mighty breakers. That's a sound of danger. And the reader is expected to know that. Now, you might not know that because you haven't been to Israel and haven't been in the desert region where floods can actually take place right out in the middle of the desert because of the rain from far away. But in spite of that, notice the end of verse 4, the Lord on high is mighty. So you've had this picture of, we started with the throne of the Lord, and then we have a picture of the troubled times, pictured by the floods, the really intense flooding, the really intense rivers. But the Lord on high is mighty. Verse 5, your testimonies are fully confirmed. Holiness benefits your house, O Lord, forevermore. And that's the whole psalm. So the picture then is how the Lord's reign is eternal. That's how we started, verses 1 and 2. And yet we have the troubled times, the uncertainty of floods, the bad things that happen, the calamity that comes in unexpectedly. But at the end of the day, the Lord is secure. So trust in the Lord, be with him. He is the place of safety, even when the floods come, even when the rivers rise, even when it looks like everything is being swept away. God is still God and has been forever and will be forever.